I was just there to fix a mailbox. Honest to God, nothing more. Thought it'd be a quick job, about an hour or two, maybe a couple of laughs with the homeowner, then boom on to the next one. But life's funny that way. I ended up delivering. Way more than just a new mailbox post that DI delivered companionship. Moments that stitched themselves quietly into my life like a warm thread you don't see coming but then can't live without. She told me out of the blue, "You're the best thing that's been delivered to my life." And that line hit me harder than any hammer or drill I'd ever picked up. I didn't know her, didn't even know her name at first. But those words marked the start of something bigger. Quiet, unfolding story about connection, vulnerability, and all the messy, beautiful things in between. This isn't just about fixing a mailbox. It's about fixing something way deeper, like the subtle repair of two lives. Unexpectedly tangled together in the middle of an ordinary day that became anything but ordinary. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning I rolled into the neighborhood with my toolbox in the truck, the sun was still just waking up, stretching golden fingers over the rooftops, casting long shadows over the freshly dew-soaked grass. I was called out to fix a busted mailbox. On Cedarwood Lane, a quiet little street I'd passed 100 times without a second thought. Pulling up to the weathered white picket fence, I eyed the sagging mailbox post that had taken more than its fair share of hits from errant bicycles and the occasional overzealous lawnmower. It leaned precariously, wobbling a little with the slightest breeze, like it was holding on for dear life. The kind of job where you think, how hard could this be? I grabbed my tools and got to work, peeled off my jacket and got ready to dive in. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and fresh earth, carrying that unmistakable hint of a new season turning. She was already outside when I parked, standing just beyond the fence, wringing her hands, eyes flickering between the mailbox and the truck. Tall, with sun-kissed hair pulled back into a messy bun, she looked like she had 1,000 stories behind those quiet eyes, stories nobody had bothered to ask. She was wearing old jeans and a faded sweater, the kind of outfit that just fits. You like a comforting hug on a rough day, no pretenses. Her smile was tentative when she greeted me, like she wanted to trust, but wasn't quite sure if she should. I caught a glimpse of something tired there. Not weariness of work, but of something heavier, threaded deep. The kind of exhaustion that wasn't just about sleep. I introduced myself, Mark, and she said her name was Lisa. Simple enough, but somehow that moment of exchange mattered more than the job description pinned on the work order. I held in my hands. I set down my tools and started inspecting the damage. The post was rotten at the base, definitely needed replacing, but the mounting and the mailbox itself were salvageable.
Ow, Lisa.
I told Lisa it'd take the better part of the morning, and that was fine. She said she had the day off, seemingly relieved, to have someone take care of what she'd been putting off. As I worked, Lisa hovered nearby, occasionally asking questions. The way people do when they're polite or maybe just lonely for conversation. There was something gentle about her. Like a calm ripple in a chaotic pond, and I realized I didn't mind talking as I hammered and drilled. The morning slipped into early afternoon without us noticing. She shared little glimpses of her world. A single mom juggling too many balls, a small flower shop just down the road that was struggling. It's the kind of honesty that didn't beg for sympathy, but quietly invited connection. There was something about fixing that mailbox that felt symbolic. An outward expression of the repair Lisa was quietly doing inside herself. Every hammered nail, every measured cut, felt like a step toward something whole again. The neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional bark of a dog or the distant hum of a lawnmower. And the sun climbed higher, painting golden highlights across the chipped paint of the mailbox itself, making it strangely beautiful in its imperfection. I noticed then a German shepherd lurking nearby, watching us with alert eyes. The dog took off when Lisa called it, but the brief interaction added a layer to the scene. Like there was more life just beneath the surface of this quiet little street. By the time the new post was sturdy and the mailbox reattached, Lisa invited me to stay for some coffee. I hesitated, but something in her eyes made me say yes. We sat on her porch steps, cups in hand, sharing small smiles that slowly grew into genuine laughter. She told me about the struggles of raising her son alone, her fears for the future, the late nights and early mornings, the fragile hope that kept her moving forward. I realized I was more than just fixing a mailbox. I was witnessing a story of resilience that didn't make noise but demanded respect. That day, I left with more than a signature on a work order. I left with a glimpse into a life touched by quiet strength and the feeling that sometimes you show up expecting to repair a thing, but end up repairing a moment, a feeling, a life. Little did I know that Mailbox was the beginning of a thread that would pull us closer over the days, too. Come in ways neither of us expected. More than wood and nails, what got fixed that day were walls of self-doubt, of loneliness, of distance that no one talked about but both of us felt. And that quiet afternoon on Cedarwood Lane was just the first brushstroke on a canvas we hadn't yet learned to paint. The next morning when I showed up at Lisa's place, I wasn't sure what to expect. The mailbox had been sturdy and sound when I left, but somehow I had this feeling that my visit wasn't just about the physical fixing anymore. I carried my bag of tools with a mix of purpose and curiosity, thinking about the laugh we shared. Last night, the way the tension in her shoulders seemed to have eased slightly. The street was just waking up, and a pair of robins flitted around the budding branches of the big maple tree shading her front yard. I was greeted by the soft bounce of that German shepherd's paws before Lisa herself appeared at the door, waving me in with that same shy smile I was starting to recognize, the one that masked so many layers beneath. It wasn't until I crossed the threshold of her modest home that I realized how much of her world I hadn't seen yesterday. The way framed photos of a wide-eyed boy and the dog adorned the walls. The small clutter of a life lived hard but with purpose. The house smelled faintly of vanilla and old books, a comforting mix that settled into you. Lisa poured us each another cup of coffee. We settled into the rundown but inviting kitchen, the morning light streaming through the curtains in gold ribbons. There was a quiet ease in that moment, one not forced but earned in the breaths. And glances shared, she told me her son, Jamie, was just 6 years old, but carried worries on his face like a much older kid. There had been sleepless nights, tears and arguments, some sparked by the chaos between the dog and the boy learning to coexist in this small house. The German shepherd, Max, was fiercely protective, but also rough, and Jamie sometimes cried when Max got too excited. Lisa's voice softened when she spoke about her struggle balancing being a mom, a worker, and a woman trying to hold everything together. She wasn't asking for me to fix all that, but her honesty invited a bond that felt real. It's not transactional. I found myself wanting to help, not just with tools, but with presence. That day wasn't about the mailbox. It was about showing up for something deeper. I offered to watch Max while Lisa took Jamie to the park so they could get some space. At first she hesitated, caught between pride and need, but she nodded. The dog was big and a handful, but I was no stranger to canines. Spending the afternoon throwing a worn tennis ball across the grass, watching Max's wagging tail soften the edges of tension in my mind, I began to understand the layers of this fragile little ecosystem. When Lisa and Jamie returned, the air felt lighter, the kid smiled more easily, and Max greeted Jamie with a gentler enthusiasm. Lisa's tired smile stretched a bit more genuine, and as she caught my eye over a shared sandwich on the worn kitchen table, I felt the subtle shift. Something was changing, a softness building that neither of us was rushing, but we both acknowledged. In silent agreement over the next few days, I came back not just to tweak the mailbox or replace a few nails, but because, in those moments with Lisa and Jamie, I found a rhythm that grounded me. I showed up in the mornings, sometimes early before work, and sometimes after, just to check in. I remember one afternoon specifically. A sudden summer storm rolled in hard, thunder rolling like a freight train, drumming the roof. Jamie was scared of storms, and Max, sensing the unease, paced restlessly. I sat on the floor with Jamie, telling him stories to try quieting the storm outside and inside. Meanwhile, Max finally curled beside us, his big head resting on Jamie's knee. It was one of those unspoken victories, small but seismic, where chaos becomes calm. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We started to share meals. Simple plates of pasta or leftover pizza, the kitchen buzzing with laughter and awkward silences balanced perfectly between us. Lisa's walls were slowly coming down, and I could tell she wasn't used to letting someone in without fear of judgment or loss. Jamie warmed up too, slowly shedding that guarded look and starting to see me as more than a stranger with tools. Those moments crystallized into something meaningful, the faint outlines of a family. Perfect but endless impossibility. Throughout it all, Max remained the wild card. One afternoon, Lisa confided that she was scared Max might scare Jamie for good, that the dog's protective nature might be too much for the sensitive boy. But I saw something else in Max, the fierce loyalty and the aching desire to belong, just like Jamie. It became my quiet mission to bridge that gap, teaching Max to soften his approach, and Jamie to understand that Max's love came in loud, rough bursts. Every day we carved out a little more space for each other. Lisa's laughter got easier, Jamie asked for help with homework, and Max greeted me with a wagging tail rather than wary growls. The mailbox fix was just the icebreaker, but what we were really building was trust, safety, and maybe, just maybe, a new kind of family. Lisa once told me that she hadn't felt anchored in years, that life had been moving too fast and fragile. Moments like these had become precious islands in a storm. I realized that while I thought I was fixing a mailbox, what Lisa and Jamie needed most was someone steady, reliable, someone who showed up and stayed, with grand gestures but with small, consistent presence. Those early days shaped the rhythm of our unusual connection. They weren't perfect, and we stumbled plenty misunderstandings. Clumsy attempts at parenting advice, moments where my unfamiliarity with their world showed through. But that's what made it authentic, no pretenses, no scripts, just real. Lives intersecting, messy and beautiful. What started as a job, a service call, had evolved into something living, breathing, and full of possibilities. As I drove away each afternoon, the mailbox standing proud and strong, I knew I was leaving behind more than just a repaired post. I was leaving a thread woven into a story that was only just beginning. Days passed with a comforting rhythm that neither Lisa nor I anticipated. Getting up was no longer just about the daily grind, but about the promise of those stately cedar trees, the rustle of leaves, and the knowledge that we'd see each other again, whether for mailbox tweaks or just a shared cup of coffee. But as the days grew longer and the smells of summer thickened the air, small fissures began to appear beneath the surface of our newfound connection. Lisa was strong, no doubt, but beneath the smile was the heavy weight of responsibility. Single mother wrestling not just with the challenges of parenting, but with her own shadows. One afternoon, I caught her standing still by the front window, eyes fixed on the cracked pavement where Jamie and Max played. Lisa's lips were pressed, thin, and the furrow in her brow told a story she wasn't ready to share just yet. As I worked repairing the loose fence post that had been bothering her, I was keenly aware of the silence hanging between thick and fragile like spun glass. Up to that point, our interactions had been easy, a delicious blend of casual banter and small moments of honesty. But here was a moment that demanded more, a quiet invitation to step deeper or step back. I didn't push. I kept busy, hammering nails and tightening screws while watching her from the corner of my eye. After a while, she said softly, "It's hard, you know, trying to keep everything together for Jamie while feeling like parts of me are breaking." The words slipped out like a confession, raw and unvarnished. I dropped my hammer and walked over on instinct. Lisa's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and in that moment, the stern facade melted, revealing a woman who had weathered storms far fiercer than any summer rain. I didn't have answers, but I didn't need to. I'm just being there. Steady and silent was enough. I placed a hand on her shoulder, a small gesture, but weighted with meaning. The moment stretched and then eased, the tension shifting like the tide pulling away fears with it. It became clear this wasn't just about fixing broken things, mailboxes, fences, or fractured trust. It was about mending invisible cracks in lives where hope sometimes felt dangerously fragile. That evening, as twilight bled into night, Lisa invited me to stay for dinner, a simple affair of roasted vegetables and grilled chicken that felt like a feast in its warmth and sincerity. Jamie was there, cheeks flushed from the day's play, eyes bright and curious as he watched me approach. With a mix of caution and intrigue, I could see the slow thaw in the way he relaxed when Lisa gave him a gentle nudge to engage. Dinner was quiet at first, punctuated only by the clink of forks and glasses. Then Jamie asked me what I did for fun when I wasn't fixing mailboxes or fences. I smiled and shared stories of my younger days' skateboarding mishaps, impromptu jam sessions, and road trips that felt endless. It surprised me how easy it was to connect through shared laughter. That night, I left Lisa's house with a new sense of understanding. Our relationship wasn't just about convenience or passing time. We were learning to trust each other, to create a small space where broken pieces could be held safely. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't what I'd expected. But it was honest. In that honesty, there was power. The days that followed were a dance of progress and setbacks. Any real relationship tends to be. Lisa's trust deepened. She confided that the fear of losing her fragile stability was suffocating. I found myself wanting to shield her from those dark edges, but knew better than to pretend I could. Jamie's laughter became a soundtrack too. Our mornings and Max, once wild and unpredictable, grew calmer as if sensing the shifting energy. He even let me scratch behind his ears in those golden hours, a sign of guarded acceptance. But the weight of reality always lurked nearby. One afternoon, Lisa's phone rang insistently, just as I was about to leave. She answered with a tight voice, her smile faltering as I overheard words like overdue bills and late rent. After she hung up, the mask briefly slipped, fear laced in her eyes. We sat in silence for a beat that stretched too long, and I realized that while I could offer a steady hand and a worn toolbox, some repairs were beyond me. That night, as I lay in my own bed, the line Lisa had spoken earlier tangled in my mind. How hard it was to hold everything together while feeling like parts were breaking. It dawned on me that fixing mailboxes was simple compared to the delicate architecture of people's lives. Our connection was no longer just about the physical. It was becoming the glue for broken hopes, the scaffolding for fragile dreams. I decided then, between restless turns and early dawns, that I would keep showing up not just for the mailbox or the fixes, but for Lisa, Jamie, and even Max. I'd bring more than tools. I'd bring presence, patience, a willingness to dive into whatever mess came next. The next morning, I arrived to find Lisa already outside, expression lighter, as if the storm inside had momentarily calmed. As I parked, Jamie ran up, eager to show me a drawing he'd made of bright sunshine with the words "Thank you" scrawled in crayon. That simple gesture, tender and pure, sealed something indefinable in me. It was no longer about being a handyman or a stranger fixing a mailbox. It was about being part of a story slowly coming to life, one small act of kindness at a time. As the weeks stacked up, our daily rituals took shape. Morning coffees, shared dinners, walks with Max, homework help, and quiet talks about everything and nothing. Lisa's laughter grew more frequent, her stories richer. Jamie's hesitant trust blossomed into a warm camaraderie. Max, once an unpredictable force, became the guardian of a fragile little world that was quietly healing. The mailbox we'd fixed together stood as a small monument, a symbol of new beginnings and repaired cracks. But the real mending was invisible, woven in glances, gestures, in the unspoken promise that neither of us was alone anymore. Through it all, I learned that sometimes the best fixes aren't the ones that can be measured by nails or screws, but those that are built in moments quiet and unassuming, that hold space for pain, hope, and ultimately, love. The warmth of those early weeks slowly gave way to a new kind of intimacy, the kind that's quieter but no less powerful. Lisa and I had settled into a rhythm. But beneath the surface of laughter and shared moments, there was a whisper of tension neither of us dared name out loud yet. It was subtle, like the first chill of autumn stealing in unnoticed, hinting that the easy days might be about to face their reckoning. Nothing about us was conventional. We weren't lovers rushing headlong into fire, nor strangers barely brushing past one another. We were something in between, suspended in a fragile space where hope and fear tangled like the tangled skeins of yarn she kept in her crafting basket. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as the sun lowered itself in the sky, casting long shadows across the old wooden porch, I found Lisa sitting quietly, her fingers absent-mindedly twisting a silver locket. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words. Jamie was playing with Max a few yards away, her laughter echoing faint, a stark contrast to the silence wrapping us like a cocoon. I wanted to bridge the gap, but there's a difference between wanting and knowing how. Sometimes the most important things stay stuck right where you're too scared to reach. Do you ever wonder if it's enough? She asked without looking up. The question hung there, simple yet loaded, piercing through the veneer of calm. I understood the weight. Behind it, whether the small acts, the quiet presence, were enough to knit the broken parts back together, or if some cracks were meant to stay. It was a question without an easy answer. I shrugged. Not because I didn't care, but because life was messy, and sometimes faith was about not having all the answers. I think. It's a start, I said finally. Sometimes the stars line up just enough for something new to take root. It was the closest thing to a promise I could offer, and it felt fragile but real. Lisa smiled faintly, the first crack in her armor showing through. She leaned back into the worn paint of the porch railing, eyes tracing patterns in the fading light. We sat like that for a while before the silence got too loud to ignore. That night I left her house with a heaviness I hadn't anticipated. Not sadness, but the weight of possibility with no roadmap in sight. The days that followed were sprinkled with moments of hesitation, a glance held too long, words almost spoken but swallowed before they could escape. There was a dance underway, a slow push and pull that neither of us trusted but both wanted to explore. Lisa invited me to join her and Jamie on a trip to the nearby farmer's market, an ordinary outing that felt monumental in its simplicity. Watching her interact with the vibrant stalls, the way her face lit up at fresh flowers and homemade bread, made me see her in a new light, not just as a woman bearing life's burdens, but as someone hungry for joy, for the vibrant colors of a life half-lived. Jamie clung to my hand as we wandered between stalls, his wide eyes taking in the worlds of fresh fruit, artisan crafts, and the buzz of strangers chatting. Max stayed close, calm and watchful. A sudden downpour caught us off guard, sending the crowd scattering for cover. We huddled beneath the striped awning of a bakery, the rain pattering against the fabric overhead in a symphony of unexpected stillness. Lisa looked at me then, a question in her eyes. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked, voice barely above the rain. I thought about it, about my own life's twists and turns. "I don't know if people can change entirely," I said slowly, "but I do believe they can grow. He'll become someone new enough to surprise even themselves." She smiled, something that felt like hope breaking through. That rain-soaked moment became a turning point, not because of grand declarations, but because real change often comes in quiet snapshots, fragments of truth in everyday life. But the fragility of that hope was soon tested. One evening, Lisa received a call that pulled the light from her eyes, a reminder that life's heaviness was never far behind. The shadow of her past, the unpaid bills, the constant worry about Jamie's future, clawed back. I saw the weight settle on her shoulders again, that familiar burden making her fold inward like a fragile bird weathering a storm. I wanted to fix it, like I'd fixed the mailbox, the fence, like I'd fixed the small broken things, but this was different. This was the kind of problem no toolbox could solve. What I could do was stay, be steady, be present. Hold space for her pain without trying to erase it. The nights that followed were quieter, more tender. Jamie slept a little closer to her bed, Max guarding the threshold. Lisa and I traded glances full of unspoken questions, tentative hopes, and cautious fears. One night, she said something that surprised me. "You're not just the handyman anymore. You're part of this this messy life I'm trying to hold together." Her voice was thick with emotion, raw and unguarded. I didn't know what to say at first. Truth was, I didn't know what this was either. But I knew I wanted to see it through. Those words settled into me like seeds dropped in fertile soil. They gave me purpose beyond repairs and quick fixes. There was no blueprint for this, no manual on patching broken hearts and building trust. It was all about showing up over and over again, even when doubt and fear knocked at the door. The weeks that stretched on brought more moments of laughter, frustration, tenderness, and growth. I met Jamie's teachers at school events helped. Lisa organized the flower shop's inventory, and even braved Max's occasionally overwhelming enthusiasm on early morning walks. Each moment, small or significant, was a thread woven into the growing tapestry of our lives, and through it all, the mailbox stood outside pristine. It's upright, a symbol of the beginning of everything. It's funny how such a simple thing could mark the start of a complicated, beautiful journey. The mailbox didn't just hold letters, it held the fragile promises, the whispered hopes, and the cracks that made us real. As the sun set on that season, I found myself not just fixing, but becoming fixed in ways I hadn't expected. Life had delivered a gift wrapped in unpredictability, a story, not about completion, but about continuous healing in the messy, beautiful art of connection. The rhythm Lisa, Jamie, Max, and I had settled into felt both comforting and fragile, like a balancing act on a tightrope where every breath mattered. Over the weeks, I noticed the subtle changes every day brought, the easing of guarded glances between Lisa and Jamie, slow softening in the way Max settled beside him instead of towering over with wild energy. What began as small victories, like Max letting Jamie pet his nose or Lisa sharing a laugh that wasn't forced, were becoming the building blocks of something deeper, though neither of us dared to give it a name. We skirted around that edge, careful not to push too hard, knowing that the past had carved deep trenches of fear and doubt where new things might crumble if rushed. I remember one particular afternoon when the sky threatened rain, and the tension in the air was almost electric. Lisa was unusually quiet, her jaw set tight as we loaded boxes of flowers into her car to prepare for a charity event at the local community center. Jamie tagged along, clutching his worn baseball glove, cheeks flushed with excitement and nerves. It was an event Lisa had hesitated to commit to, but decided was worth trying for the chance to connect, to stretch beyond the walls that had held her for too long. Yet, as we drove down winding streets and past the familiar faces that flicked curious looks our way, I saw the shadow of doubt clouding her gaze. When we arrived, the community center buzzed with activity, laughter, chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the tank of fresh food cooking. Lisa's flowers brightened the room like patches of sunshine, and Jamie's nervous energy slowly melted into smiles as he found other kids to play with. I watched them from a distance, a guardian of sorts, feeling a swell of pride in how far we'd come. But as the evening unfolded, I sensed the undercurrent beneath the joyful veneer. Lisa's struggles were far from over. In the quiet moments between greeting neighbors and stacking bouquets, she let down her guard just long enough to whisper, "Sometimes I don't know if I belong anywhere anymore." Her words hit me hard. Belonging, that elusive feeling so many of us chase, was something Lisa had been starved for, and I recognized that hunger in myself as well. I stepped closer, offering a quiet reassurance that felt both inadequate and necessary. We didn't have to pretend the world was perfect. We just had to be real together. After the event, as we loaded the empty boxes back into her car, Jamie clutched my hand, eyes wide and filled with questions about the strange new world of community gatherings. Max.com now, despite the crowd, padded close, his presence a silent comfort. Lisa, exhausted but determined, turned to me and said something I wasn't ready for but knew I'd been waiting to hear. "You've given me something I didn't even know I needed, a sense of hope." That night, as I drove home, those words echoed inside me like a lighthouse beacon in fog. Hope wasn't a grand gesture or some perfect ending, but the quiet thread that kept us moving forward. I realized that what had started as a simple repair job had become a journey into the heart of what it means to show up, not just with tools, but with time, patience, and an open heart. But hope is fragile. The next morning brought a harsh reminder that life doesn't always bend to our wishes. Lisa's phone buzzed with news that the flower shop's biggest client was pulling out, leaving her staring down a financial cliff she wasn't sure how to climb. The weight of months of effort threatened to collapse in an instant, and the fear, raw and unfiltered, returned to her eyes. She kept it tight, tried to steel herself, but I saw the cracks. I wanted to fix it. All of it. The broken mailbox, the rough fence, the mounting bills. But this wasn't something a hammer could mend. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I stayed. I helped make calls, brainstormed ideas for new customers, and most importantly, I showed up. Sometimes that's the biggest fix. Presence, consistency. The promise that you're not walking away when the going gets tough. Lisa was scared, but in those moments, she wasn't alone. Jamie, too, sensed the strain. One evening, as I helped him with homework, he asked if Max would ever be his forever dog, a small question charged with hope and uncertainty. I smiled and told him that sometimes the best things in life take a little time to catch up, but when they do, they're worth holding on to. It was a promise I hoped to keep for all of us. Day by day, the bond grew stronger, but so did the challenges. There were nights when Lisa's exhaustion made her snap at me or Jamie, the kind of raw fatigue that has no filter and no apology. There were moments of doubt. What was this? A fling? A friendship? Something more? We navigated these questions like careful hikers avoiding cliffs, sometimes sliding into awkward silences or missteps. But even then, the undercurrent of care and commitment held us together. One evening, Lisa's eyes caught mine across the kitchen table, and without words, we both acknowledged the unspoken truth. Whatever this was, it wasn't easily defined or labeled, but it was real, she whispered. I don't know where this is going, but I don't want it gone. It was enough. Sometimes not knowing is a risk worth taking. The mailbox outside gleamed under the street lamp's soft glow, humble reminder of the day we first met. It had become a symbol not just of handiwork, but of beginnings, resilience, and the beautiful mésanges of human connection. And so, we kept building, not just with wood and nails, but with trust, hope, and the fierce, stubborn belief that whatever life throws at us, something good can be delivered, even when we least expect it by now. The days felt less like separate incidents and more like threads weaving a tapestry neither of us fully understood yet. Lisa's house was no longer just a place where I showed up to fix her mailbox or patch. Fence, it was a world bursting with stories, fears, joy, hope, and the kind of raw, unpredictable energy that only comes with lives intertwined, I found. Myself less the outsider, and more a crossroad where their lives met, a steady presence amidst the chaos, the constant. Max, once as wild as the winds that ripped through the nearby pines, had become a gentle giant, his eyes softening as I gave him space to be himself and taught Jamie how to approach him with patience and care. It became clear that Jamie's world was fragile, filled with the kind of childhood struggles most people don't see, nights haunted by silence thicker than any storm, mornings shadowed by the absence of a father who wasn't coming back. Lisa bore that burden alone, the weight folding her into herself when the house grew quiet and the days stretched long. And yet, within all that, there was something fierce about her determination to keep breathing life into their shared world, no matter the cost. One afternoon, I caught it, a glimpse of vulnerability that stayed with me for days. Lisa and Jamie were sitting on the worn porch steps, Max lying quietly beside them. When Jamie asked a question so simple, yet so piercing, "Do you think people like us ever get their happy endings?" Lisa smiled then, but it was tinged with sadness. "I don't know, kiddo, but I do know that happy moments. We make them ourselves, one small moment at a time." I stood on the edge of the porch, pretending to check the mower, but really, it's listening, feeling the gravity of the moment, the quiet courage in those words. I thought back to the mailbox, that crooked post held up by hope and a few nails. How fixing it felt like a metaphor for something larger. How sometimes the smallest acts carry the biggest meaning. The job was never about the mailbox. It was about what the mailbox represented: connection, trust, the idea that even broken things can be repaired with patience and care. But life being life, the past hasn't a care for new beginnings. Just as we were finding our footing, a call from the landlord reminded Lisa that the rent was overdue. Another bill, another threat, another sleepless night. I saw the walls she'd started to lower come crashing back up. It was like trying to fill a bucket with holes. Money was tight. The flower business was barely hanging on, and pressures from every direction were clawing for attention. But still, Lisa never stopped fighting. Instead, she fought with a quiet dignity, showing up for Jamie, for Max, for me. For that glimmer of hope we clung to. That night, I stayed later than usual, helping her tally bills and plan. Neither of us spoke about the fear weighing heavy in the room. But our silence was a language of its own, a pact that said we're in this together. Jamie was asleep upstairs, and Max rested his head on my foot like a loyal, silent guardian. There was no easy fix, no quick solution. But there was something in those moments, a deeply human endurance I hadn't expected. I started bringing extra food, little surprises: a loaf of freshly baked bread from a friend, some coffee to fuel. Late nights. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lisa's smile grew a little brighter, her eyes a little less clouded. Jamie started calling me Uncle Mark one evening, a title I accepted with equal parts pride and awe. It wasn't a perfect family, not by a long shot, but it was ours in a way that mattered more than labels. One morning, as the dawn broke, amber and pink across the sky, Lisa caught me outside with Max. We stood in silence, breathing in the fresh air. Then, without warning, she said, "I don't want this to be just a chapter, Mark. I want to see where this goes, even if it's scary." The words landed with the weight of a confession and a hope, both fragile and fierce. I nodded slowly. I felt it too, the pull of something deeper, something worth fighting for beyond nails and screws and mailbox posts. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were arguments, misunderstandings, nights when exhaustion made us brittle and raw. But what set us apart was the choice to keep coming back, to keep showing up even when it was easier to walk away. We weren't just repairing a mailbox anymore. We were building a life, piece by imperfect piece. The mailbox outside still stood, a steady beacon, proof that even the most fragile beginnings can hold strong if you give them enough care. I looked at it sometimes and smiled, knowing it wasn't just metal and wood. It was the start of everything that followed: the laughter, the tears, the late-night talks, and quiet mornings with coffee cups in hand as the first leaves of autumn began to fall. I realized that what I'd thought was just a simple repair job had become something profound, a lesson that sometimes the best things delivered aren't packages or letters, but moments, connections, and the kind of unexpected love that shows up when you're least expecting it. The foundation we'd been quietly building felt solid yet fragile, like glass, strengthened by careful handling but still prone to cracking if dropped wrong. Lisa and I were navigating uncharted waters each day, peeling back layers of fear, hope, and longing that neither of us was quite ready to face head-on. Our connection had matured beyond the simple fixes I was called to make, growing into something neither of us fully understood, but both desperately wanted to protect. One chilly evening, as dusk settled and the sky darkened to a deep indigo, Lisa invited me inside after I'd finished resecuring a loose step on her porch. The air was thick with the scent of candle wax and trace amounts of vanilla from the simmering pot on the stove. Jamie was already in bed, Max snoozing quietly nearby. We sat close, the only sound, the flicker of the flame dancing against the walls. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, tension pooling like a reservoir waiting to overflow. Finally, Lisa broke the silence. "Mark, I have to be honest with you," she said, her voice trembling. "There's a part of me that's terrified that opening up like this means I'll get hurt all over again." I reached out, hand gentle on hers. "I get it," I said quietly. "I've been hurt too. But sometimes, the greatest risk is not taking one at all." Her eyes glistened, the weight of years pressing down in that space between us. "I want to believe," she whispered, "but I don't know if I can." And in that moment, I realized this was less about fixing mailboxes and more about rebuilding shattered trust, Trust not just in others, but in ourselves. In the possibility of happiness, we were no longer strangers. We were two damaged souls. Looking for redemption in the small light of connection, the days that followed tested that fragile bond in ways neither of us had imagined. One afternoon brought a dispute over Jamie's schooling with the boys to Chura, disagreement that sparked frustration and doubt. Lisa called me afterward, voice tight with pent-up stress. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm failing him," she said. "If I'm failing us," I reminded her she was far from alone. "We're in this together," I said. "Failures don't define us. How we respond does." That night, as I watched Lisa pacing restlessly in her living room, the enormity of her strength hit me with fresh clarity. Life had thrown her into the deep end, but she kept swimming, raw and unyielding. I wanted to be her anchor, but knew the truth was sometimes anchors weigh you down. What she needed was a partner who could swim alongside, matching her strokes. Weeks blurred as we juggled parenting, work, and the lingering ghosts of past hurts. Jamie's laughter returned brighter and more frequent, a soothing balm that reminded us why we fought through the uncertainty. Max, ever the silent guardian, shifted his role from protector to confidant, resting his massive head on my knee while we shared quiet moments of respite. The mailbox, perched solidly at the end of Lisa's driveway, watched over our unfolding story like a sentinel, less a piece of hardware and more a symbol of perseverance. Each letter it carried, each parcel it delivered, was layered with the unseen threads of trust we were weaving. One morning, I arrived to find Lisa already on the porch, coffee cup in hand, the cool air crisp against her skin. She smiled hesitantly, the kind of smile that held both hope and caution. "Mark," she said, voice soft, I'm ready to try." Try, such a simple word loaded with weight. Try meant risk, vulnerability, the possibility of joy or heartbreak. I nodded, feeling the steady beat of something strong growing between us. "Me too," I said. "Whatever this is, it's worth the risk." That day marked a subtle but profound shift. We talked more openly, shared fears and dreams, acknowledged pain without flinching. The mailbox continued its silent vigil, but inside the house, trust and love began to take root. Inmusy, imperfect, and utterly alive. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, nights when old wounds bled anew, but we showed up time and again, clawing toward something real. Lisa's strength, Jamie's innocence, Max's loyal presence, they formed the anchors in this stormy sea. And through it all, I realized that sometimes the best repairs aren't with hammer and nail, but with patience, courage, and the willingness to keep trying even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. The days settled into an unsteady comfort, the kind that holds you just before life shifts again. Our mornings together, Lisa, Jamie, Max, and me grew into quiet rituals that felt safe, small islands of peace amid the chaos. Coffee on the porch, Jamie's reluctant smiles as he practiced spelling words. Max curled at our feet, the world moving slower for just a bit. It was a balance, fragile but precious, patched, in moments more than grand plans. But comfort, like any good thing, invited its own struggles. Our unspoken fears, the ones dressed up in careful silences, started to pulse beneath the surface. Nudging at the edges of what we dared to believe, Lisa was cautious, her walls built tall from years of bracing for disappointment. I found myself walking the tightrope between patience and the desperate need to break through, to show her that letting someone in didn't mean losing yourself. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and spilled gold across the floorboards, the routine cracked. Lisa retreated deeper into herself, distant and guarded. Jamie noticed and asked questions she skirted, her voice trembling, her answers clipped. The tension wrapped itself around us like a tightening coil, and I struggled to find the words that would unfreeze the growing distance. Late that night, I found her standing by the window, staring out at the fading light. The silence between us was thick until she whispered a confession. "I'm scared, Mark. Scared of failing Jamie, scared of losing everything I've worked so hard for." Her vulnerability punched through my defenses, raw and real. I took her hand, steady and sure, we're building something strong, I said. It won't be perfect, but it'll be ours. Over the next days, those words became our quiet anchor. We faced the small crises: a missed bill, a forgotten school meeting, a rough day with Max together, leaning on that fragile trust. Jamie's laughter returned, brighter still, and even Max seemed to sense the shift, his loyalty deepening as he grew less wild and more protector. But the past has a way of biting back. An unexpected visit from Lisa's estranged brother unearthed old wounds and ignited conflicts that threatened to tear apart the fragile peace. The confrontation was messy, loud, and painful, a reminder that healing isn't linear but a battle, fought in fits and starts. Lisa's face bore the scars of years of silence and pain. Watching her struggle to keep control broke something open inside me. I stayed close, offering steadiness, my presence a silent promise that no matter how hard the fight, she wouldn't face it alone. That night, around a table cluttered with takeout boxes and empty coffee mugs, we shared stories of loss, resilience, and the fierce love that pushes us to try again, through it all. The mailbox stood at the edge of the yard, a silent witness to the messiness of life, the victories and setbacks, the beautiful chaos of becoming. It was no longer just an object. It had morphed into a symbol of hope, endurance, and the unbreakable bonds formed when people show up for each other. And as autumn deepened and the leaves turned fiery shades of orange and red, something shifted. Between USA's recognition that whatever came next, we were in it together. No guarantees, no perfect endings, just the raw, unfiltered reality of two people choosing connection every day, despite the odds. The nights grew longer, and the chill in the air wasn't just the season shifting. It was the subtle hint that change was coming, whether we were ready or not. Lisa and I had built something fragile but genuine, a delicate dance of trust and hope threaded through our daily lives. But beneath the surface, the echoes of past pain whispered warnings. Neither of us could ignore them forever. One evening, I found Lisa sitting beneath the glow of a single lamp in the kitchen, the soft scratch of a pencil on paper filling the silence. She was drawing, something she hadn't done in years, a little sketch of Jamie, Max, and the two of us, smiling beneath a sprawling tree. For a moment, I saw the woman behind the walls, the one longing for something more, but afraid to hope too hard. The drawing was imperfect but full of courage, a quiet declaration that she was willing to try despite the fear. We talked late into the night, her voices low but steady. She shared stories of her childhood, of broken promises and the long shadow cast by absent family members. I told her about my own scars, the times I'd felt lost, and the moments I'd clawed back. Opening up was terrifying but liberating. That night wasn't a fairy tale, it was messy, raw, and real. It was exactly what we needed. But the cracking of walls brought new challenges. Jamie's school called with concerns, not about his grades, but about his behavior. I listened carefully as Lisa explained the struggles he faced, frustrations at home, fears he couldn't voice, and the restless energy that sometimes overwhelmed him. It was hard watching her shoulder so much. Guilt, the weight of mothering, doubled by worry. I did my best to be a steady rock, to help with homework, to be a patient ear, to offer distractions and encouragement. Max, sensing the rising tension, grew fiercely protective. One afternoon, when Jamie lost his temper and shouted in frustration, Max stayed close, a silent sentinel guarding both boy and home. Those moments were reminders that love isn't always easy. It's rough, loud, and sometimes uncomfortable. But it's also the force that keeps us coming back, again and again. Financial pressures tightened their grip too. The flower shops. Sales faltered, forcing Lisa into late nights sorting inventory and brainstorming new ideas. I pitched in, using my contacts to connect her with a small local event that could bring in customers. The exhaustion was palpable, but so was the determination. We were fighting for more than just survival. We were fighting for a future worth believing in. Then came the conversation neither of us wanted, but both knew was inevitable. One evening after Jamie was asleep, Lisa looked at me and said, "Mark, what are we doing? Where is this going?" The question hung heavy between us, charged with uncertainty and hope. I took a deep breath and said, "I don't have all the answers, but I know I want to keep trying with you with Jamie." There was silence, then a tentative nod. It wasn't a promise sealed in certainty, but a step forward, a willingness to embrace the unknown together. That night, as I lay awake, I realized this wasn't just about two people finding each other. It was about forging a new kind of family, one born not of perfection but of resilience, patience, and the courage to build despite brokenness. Outside, the mailbox stood firm against the dark, steadfast symbol of beginnings and of the countless small moments that stitch a life together. The weeks blurred with a dizzying mix of hope and hardship. Lisa, Jamie, Max, and I found ourselves woven into a fragile tapestry of moments that stitched our lives tighter than I ever imagined possible. The flower shop, once hanging by a thread, began to find new footing through community events and word of the small victories that whispered promise. Jamie's laughter filled the house brighter, his school struggles gradually easing as he felt safer, understood, less alone. Max, who once wrestled with his own anxious energy, matured into a calm protector, his presence a balm in the storm of daily life. But life, as it often does, refused to smooth out its edges for long. One biting cold morning, Lisa received a call. That rattled our fragile piece of letter from the landlord. A warning about overdue rent that left her eyes dimmed by exhaustion and fear. The weight of bills and responsibility bore down heavy, threatening to crush the small progress we'd made. I saw the walls she'd carefully lowered start to rise again, brick by brick. Yet in that moment, something shifted. Instead of retreating, Lisa turned to me, her voice steady but worn. "I don't want to lose this," she said, meaning more than just the roof over her head. I nodded, understanding that keeping a home was about more than shelter. It was about keeping the fragile hope alive, determined not to let circumstances defeat us. I stepped up in ways beyond what I thought I was capable of. I started helping with odd jobs around the neighborhood, bringing in extra cash. I reached out to friends and community members to support Lisa's business, hammering out deals and opportunities relentlessly, no matter how exhausting some days were brutal long hours, tight budgets, and stretched thin nerves, but every smile from Jamie and every grateful glance from Lisa made it clear this fight was worth it. Through the turbulence, our bond deepened. One night, after a particularly grueling day, we found ourselves sprawled on the couch, the gentle breathing of Jamie and the steady warmth of Max beside us. Lisa's hand found mine, fingers curling tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Not giving up. My own voice caught in my throat. No words could capture what showing up every day, every challenge, meant. We sat in that quiet, the world reduced to the simple act of holding on. But it wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about building a life filled with moments that mattered. Weekends were spent crafting small adventures, picnics in the park, movie nights with popcorn and blankets, lazy mornings where time slowed down enough to breathe. Lisa's laughter grew easier, more frequent, melting away some of the fatigue that had settled into us all. And then came the revelation for both of us that this wasn't just companionship or a fragile alliance against hardship. It was something deeper, something that scared us both. One evening, as the sunset bled its last reds over the horizon, Lisa looked into my eyes and said, "I think I love you." The words were fragile, like a seedling just breaking soil, vulnerable and trembling. I reached out and took her hands, steadying both her and myself. "I love you too," I said, the admission lighting a spark in the dimming room, bright and fierce. From that moment, everything shifted, not magically, but unmistakably. We embraced the machinations of blending lives, of learning to be partners, navigating the unknown. There were fears and doubts, moments when the weight of the past pressed too close. But love, the kind after all the struggles and scars, gave us the strength to persevere. The mailbox, once a symbol of simple repair, now stood sentinel, to a family in the making, imperfect, battered, and resilient. It held letters and packages, yes, but more than that, it held our promises, our daily commitment to show up, to build, to love in the quiet triumphs. The small joys and the setbacks we faced together, I realized that what was delivered to Lisa's life wasn't just a fixed mailbox. It was trust, hope, and a love resilient enough to weather any storm. The seasons shifted, and so did we, bearing scars. Carrying hope, cautiously stepping into a future that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. After Lisa's whispered confession echoed between us one quiet evening, things changed subtly but profoundly. Wasn't this sweeping, flawless moment? It was the small things in the way she hummed while cooking, the way Jamie burst into a grin when he saw me, the softness in Max's eyes when he nudged her hand. We had begun to build a new kind of family, one forged in the deep fires of struggle and the patient acts of everyday kindness. But love, as I'd learned over the years, wasn't a cure lit, didn't erase the past or smooth away every wrinkle of fear. There were days when doubt crept in, nights when exhaustion made us brittle and raw. Lisa sometimes retreated into herself, haunted by memories waiting in the shadows. I faced my own fears of failing them, of not being enough, of losing the fragile gains we'd made. And yet each struggle drew us closer, stitching invisible threads of resilience between us. One particularly cold morning, Julie, the counselor Jamie had reluctantly started seeing, called to update us. Jamie was making progress, learning new ways to express his frustration, gaining tools to heal the invisible wounds he carried. Hearing those words was a small victory, a light piercing the fog. Lisa's smile that day was quiet but unwavering, a testament to the battles waged and hope illuminated. Life outside our little world kept spinning too. The flower shop, a symbol of Lisa's passion and grit, began growing stronger. Fueled by community support and new ideas, we brainstormed in late-night discussions. Stirred by equal parts excitement and anxiety, I found ways to support her beyond. Fixing things a partner not just with tools, but vision and commitment. We dreamed together, sometimes timidly, sometimes boldly, of what might be possible. And then came the unexpected, the invitation to a family gathering. Lisa had avoided reconnecting with her tight-knit relatives for years. Wounds too fresh, fears too deep. But the subtle encouragement from me, paired with her own growing confidence, nudged her to try. I was nervous, knowing how fragile the healing was, but hopeful. We walked into that warm house filled with scent of baking and laughter, the kind of place where memories float in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Lisa was guarded at first, but as faces softened and stories were shared, walls started to crumble. Jamie found cousins his age, laughter echoing through rooms where sorrow once lingered. Us, ever the quiet guardian, stayed close by Lisa's side. I watched his family embrace the woman I'd come to know, scars and all. It was a moment of healing, not just for Lisa, but for all of us who'd been carrying invisible burdens that night. As we drove home under a sky thick with stars, she reached out and took my hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "Thank you for believing," she whispered. And in that quiet exchange, I knew we were becoming something enduring and perfect, beautiful and fiercely real. But life, as always, didn't pause for these moments. New challenges emerged, unexpected expenses, worries about Jamie's future, schooling, the persistent hum of uncertainty. Yet we faced them head on, together, armed with the strength born from the trials behind us. We weren't naive. We knew the road wouldn't be easy. But love had given us something vital, a reason to keep moving forward, even when the night felt impossibly dark. Through the hard times and the joys alike, the mailbox stood firm outside, steadfast and true. It had transformed from a symbol of simple handyman work to a monument of resilience, hope, and a home slowly built on trust. Each letter slipped inside wasn't just mail. It was a reminder of the life we were choosing to build, one day at a time. And as I settled into this new life, no longer just a repairman fixing broken things, but a man helping build a family, realized the true delivery wasn't the mailbox repaired on a quiet street. It was the gift of connection, belonging, and the kind of love that shows up when you least expect it but need it most. The months had passed like seasons unfolding, and with each sunrise, Lisa, Jamie, Max, and I found new rhythms, fierce commitments in the everyday moments that stitched us closer. What began as a simple job fixing a mailbox on a quiet street had transformed into something profound, the making of a family, not born out of perfection, but out of resilience, trust, and the unyielding choice to show up despite the scars. That mailbox, now steady and proud at the end of her driveway, stood witness to a journey neither of us could have predicted. Life wasn't perfect, and it would never be. We still faced struggles, the weight of bills and broken dreams, the sharp edges of old wounds reopening. But those challenges no longer felt like walls to break us. They were hurdles we faced with each other, arms linked. Together we were stronger. Together, we were home. I found myself more than just a handyman. I was a partner, a father figure, a friend, a steadying hand when things got tough. Lisa's smile was more than just relief. It was hope shining through the clouds. Jamie's laughter rang out freer, the boy no longer shadowed by fear, but buoyed by love. Max, once erratic, had settled into the role of protector and companion, his presence a constant drumbeat of loyalty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of oranges and purples, we gathered around the dinner table simple. Food, shared stories, a space filled with warmth that money can't buy. Lisa reached over to squeeze my hand, her eyes shining with the kind of gratitude that words never quite capture. "You're the best thing that's been delivered to my life," she said softly, and I knew that couldn't have been more true. But I also understood that our story was still being written. The mailbox wasn't just a relic, it was the opening. Chapter in a book destined to be filled with the kind of love few are lucky enough to find. It was a symbol that repair isn't just about fixing what's broken, but about creating something new from the pieces messy, perfect, but ours. As we cleared the table and we prepared for the night, I looked out the window at the mailbox, gleaming under the street lamp, proud and unyielding. It was more than wood and metal, it was hope delivered. A testament to the power of showing up and the magic that happens when you do. That quiet, steadfast symbol held the echoes of laughter, whispered fears, quiet victories, and unspoken promises. It was a beacon for anyone who believed in second chances and the beauty of repair, not just of things, but of lives. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, we held on to one profound truth, that even in the face of hardship, love could be delivered in unexpected ways. It was in the small moments, the steady presence, the choice to keep trying. It was in the fallback smiles, the hands held tight in the dark, in the laughter that filled the spaces where pain once lived. Our journey was far from over. But we'd learned that the heart's repairs are ongoing, layered with pain and joy, and that the deepest connections are built not on perfection, but on persistence, patience, and the courage to embrace the unknown. So if you ever find yourself fixing someone's mailbox or just showing up for them in whatever way you can, remember this: sometimes the best things delivered aren't packages or letters. They're the unexpected gifts of trust, hope, and love that can change a life forever. And that's exactly what happened on a quiet street. When I picked up my tools and found myself part of an imperfect, beautiful family, delivered in full, one moment at a time, before I ever showed up with my toolbox to fix that mailbox. Lisa's world had been shaped by battles few saw. Growing up in a small town not far from here, she'd faced hardship early, watching her family fracture under the weight of addiction and absence left marks that ran deep. The kind of marks you don't talk about over coffee but show up in quiet ways, in the way she guarded her feelings, in the walls built to protect a heart that had been broken more than once. Her teenage years were a patchwork of survival jobs to help pay the bills, nights worrying about siblings, and a fierce desire to carve out a different path for herself. I learned some of this on slow evenings after Jamie was asleep, during conversations that weren't forced but unfolded naturally, like rivers finding their way through valleys. Lisa's voice betrayed no bitterness, only a rugged determination, shaped by all she'd endured. I didn't want my son to have the same story she told me once. But sometimes, the past. It's like a shadow you carry, even when you want to run toward the light. Those words stuck with me. They weren't a complaint, but a truth. Healing isn't linear, and the weight of history can either drag you down or fuel the fight too. Rise. Her journey to hear this quiet neighborhood with the mailbox that needed fixing was a pilgrimage through pain, resilience, and hope. She'd become a florist because flowers, she said, remind me there's beauty even in broken places. That shop wasn't just a business. It was a tribute to survival, to growth, to the stubborn refusal to let difficult roots define the whole plant. Every bouquet arranged was a small act of defiance against the past, a promise that the future could be different. Knowing all this gave me a new lens to see Lisa not just a homeowner with a broken mailbox, but a woman who was fighting a silent war every day. It made me realize that showing up with my tools was the easy part. Showing up for the fight beneath took everything I had, and it was worth it. But the past wasn't just behind her, it sometimes slid up unexpectedly, like an uninvited guest. Old friends reappeared, some offering help, others stirring trouble. A neighborhood block party brought a blast from those earlier days. A cousin, who hadn't been part of the good story, showing up with harsh words and old grudges. Watching Lisa face that storm, standing firm with quiet dignity while I stood beside her, reinforced that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just an unyielding refusal to break Jamie. Two carried echoes of that past, but unlike Lisa, his story was just starting. Hearing about Lisa's struggles gave me a new project in mind, and just fixing the mailbox and helping Lisa, but helping Jamie build a future where he wasn't shadowed by old pain but free to chart his own course. That meant more school meetings, more late-night talks, and honestly, more patience than I thought I had. Max, through it all, became a symbol of loyal steadfastness, living proof that healing often involves quiet, consistent presence. Watching that dog stick by the boy's side, sensing pain without judgment, was a lesson in love that didn't demand perfection. Max was more than a pet. He was part of the family healing. The road ahead wasn't easy. Lisa's past was a weathered map with potholes and detours, but it also had markers pointing toward growth and redemption. And I was grateful to be part of the journey, even as just a regular guy called to fix a mailbox, who found himself caught in a story far bigger than nails and wood. Jamie was a kid who wore his emotions on his sleeve, but the world around him sometimes taught him to hide the storm beneath. At 6 years old, his eyes held a quiet complexity, a hint of the weight he carried despite his tender age. His days filled with school lessons, scraped knees from playground adventures, and the heavy silence that often settled at home. Jamie was navigating a path riddled with both childhood wonder and the challenges that come with broken family dynamics. From the first time I met him, I sensed that Jamie was a lot like Lisa, mix of fierce determination and cautious vulnerability. School was a battleground for the boy, not because of academics, but because he struggled with social interactions and managing emotions. A recent meeting with his teachers revealed moments of frustration that spilled into behavior issues, a cry for help wrapped in silence. Watching Lisa handle those meetings, her exhaustion barely masked by stern resolve, made me realize the depth of the daily uphill battle. My role quickly expanded beyond handyman duties. I became a sounding board for Jamie's small victories and big fears, helping him with homework, playing catch in the yard, and simply being a consistent presence started to build bridges where walls once stood. Jamie's hesitant trust blossomed slowly, each shared laugh a brick in the foundation of his healing. There was a pivotal afternoon when Jamie invited me to the school's reading hour. Sitting amidst a circle of kids, his face lit up as he sounded outwards, the pride and focus unmistakable. It was a small victory, but a breakthrough nonetheless. I realized then that sometimes the biggest impact comes not from grand gestures, but from showing, consistently being the steady hand when it's most needed. Max, ever the gentle guardian, always had a way of sensing Jamie's moods. On tough days, the dog would sit quietly beside him, offering comfort without words. The bond between them was a lesson in unconditional support, a reminder that healing often requires patience, kindness, and the quiet presence of a friend who doesn't judge. At home, Jamie's world was a mix of laughter and uncertainty. He was keenly aware of Lisa and me navigating something new and fragile, sometimes asking questions with a candor that pierced through any pretense. "Is Mark going to stay?" he asked one night, eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. I didn't have all the answers, but I promised to keep showing up, a promise I meant with every ounce of my being. Days turned into weeks, and Jamie gradually settled into a rhythm that felt safer and more joyful. We celebrated small wins: no missed homework, a teacher's praise, a new friend made at school. Each was a beacon in the often murky seas he was learning to sail. Yet like all journeys, there were setbacks. Bad days where frustration boiled over, tears spilled freely, and the weight of everything threatened to pull us under. But even in those moments, the bond we forged held tight. Weathering the storms alongside him, throughout it all, Jamie was a vivid reminder of why we fought so hard, not for perfection, but for moments of peace, trust, and love that build a foundation strong enough to hold even the most fragile hearts. Max wasn't just any German shepherd. He was the living, breathing pulse of that house, a silent testimony to loyalty, protection, and healing in ways that words struggled to capture. When I first met him, Max was a whirlwind wrapped in fur. He barked like a thunderclap, his paws thumping heavy across the floor, and his eyes flickered with a wild energy that seemed both fierce and hesitant. That dog carried the weight of his own story scars and fears that mirrored in some strange way the human lives intertwined around him. Early on, Max and Jamie had a complicated relationship. The kid was scared of the dog's boundless energy. Max was unsure how to temper his instinctual protectiveness when faced with the boy's sensitive nature. Their interactions were a tense dance of uncertainty, Max's tail sometimes wagging too hard, his jumps overwhelming Jamie, who flinched but didn't retreat. I spent hours observing, learning Max's signals, the flick of an ear, the shift in stance, and patiently working to help the dog understand what was expected in this new family dynamic. It wasn't about suppressing his spirit, but channeling it in a way that made Jamie feel safe, not threatened. Training Max wasn't just about commands. It was about building trust. I sat with him on the porch steps, my hand running along his thick coat, whispering soft reassurances when storms rattled the windows. I taught Jamie how to approach Max gently, to recognize when the dog needed space. Progress came in fits and starts, marked by small victories: Max sitting calmly when Kate passed by, Jamie reaching out to pet him without pulling away. Those moments were like gold, fragile yet transformative. Beyond the physical training, Max was the heart of emotional healing. I watched him become Jamie's quiet protector, sensing when the boy was scared or overwhelmed. On nights when the thunder roared, Max would settle at Jamie's feet, radiating calm. When Jamie was frustrated, Max's steady presence grounded him, offering a safe harbor in a storm of feelings. It was in these moments that I realized Max was more than a pet. He was a therapist without words, guardian of fragile hearts. Max's influence reached Lisa too. She found solace in caring for him, a channel for her love and anguish alike. Watching her brush his fur or talk softly to him after difficult days showed me how healing operated in this household. It wasn't always spoken, but lived through nuances of touch, shared glances, and quiet companionship. Max became a living bridge connecting each of us, a reminder that healing happens in presence, not prescriptions. Walking Max became a ritual that anchored our days. Those evening strolls transformed the quiet neighborhood into a place of connection. Max's friendly bark and wagging tail thawed the distance between us and our neighbors, sparking casual conversations and the slow weaving of a community fabric that had frayed over years of isolation. I saw how Max's warmth and sociability rubbed off on Jamie, coaxing the boy out of his shell-a-chain reaction of healing, sparked by a dog who simply showed up. One particularly cold winter evening, I watched Max patiently endure the brunt of Jamie's tantrums, not with annoyance but with unyielding patience. When Jamie's frustration exploded into tears, Max didn't flinch. Instead, he laid his massive head gently on Jamie's lap, offering comfort in the simplest, most profound way. It was a lesson in unconditional love, in presence, in how sometimes the best support is the quietest. Max's growth mirrored our own. From a wild dog brimming with unchanneled energy, he became a steady force, a playful friend to Jamie, a loyal companion to Lisa, and a grounding presence for me. Watching him transform taught me that change doesn't happen overnight. It requires patience, persistence, and the willingness to show up again and again, even when progress seems slow, beyond the walls of the house. Max carried a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Neighbors who once passed by without a glance now paused to pet him, to ask about his training, to share snippets of their own lives. Max had become a local ambassador of sorts, breaking down barriers not just within our family, but across the community. His presence suggested that healing wasn't solitary, it was shared. Communal, collective. I saw Max's role as more than symbolic. He was a living embodiment of the story we were all writing together, chapter by chapter. His loyalty reminded us of the power in showing up, over and over, for those you care about. His patient energy was a steady drumbeat that underscored our slow climb from chaos to calm, and in quiet moments, when the day's noise had faded and the world felt still, I'd catch Max's gaze the deep, knowing look in his eyes that spoke of ancient wisdom and unspeakable love. That dog had seen hurt but carried on. He embodied resilience not with bravado, but with quiet steadfastness. Max wasn't just part of the family, he was the heart of it, a loyal companion who taught us daily that the greatest healing often comes not from words or actions, but from simply being there. And in that, Max delivered what no toolbox ever could: a bridge to hope, touchstone of trust, and a reminder that love, sometimes loud, sometimes silent, holds us together through everything. Life inside Lisa's home was a delicate dance. But outside those walls, another world waited the neighborhood. The people whose glances, whispers, and judgments shaped the unspoken challenges we faced every day. The mailbox repair was the starting point, but the true tests of connection happened not in solitude, but in these shared streets and common spaces where community was both a comfort and a hurdle. Lisa had lived here for years. In this small, unassuming neighborhood where people kept to themselves and trust was often a commodity more scarce than gold. The most anyone saw of her was the shy wave from a distance or hurried greetings that stopped short of invitation. Her past struggles, whispered rumors about her, but mostly never asked about, had cast shadows that extended far beyond the cracked fence we'd fixed. As I started to show up more, not just as a handyman, but as a steady presence doors began to open. It was an instant and it wasn't easy. The first step was simple recognition. Neighbors nodding hello as Max and I passed.
Out.
Old Mrs. Caldwell waving from across the street, the shy smile from a young couple next door. Each small gesture was a crack in the wall of isolation that had boxed Lisa in. One afternoon, a block party brought the neighborhood bubbling to life. A rare chance for connection under the summer sun, and colorful banners strung from tree to tree. Lisa was hesitant to go, the fear of judgment wrestling with a longing to belong. I encouraged her gently, reminding her that healing also meant stepping outside. Even when it was scary at the block party, colors burst everywhere, kids running. With ice cream, music swelled softly through the air, and tables groaned under dishes brought to share. Neighbors chatted, laughed, and slowly opened their hearts, letting old wounds soften through shared moments. I saw Lisa's shoulders relax under the sun's warmth, her smile blossoming as she handed out bouquets from her flower shop. Little islands of beauty on a day filled with promise. Conversations bubbled up. Mrs. Gardner, who had lived here since before Lisa arrived, asked about the shop and offered suggestions for local fairs. Mr. Ramirez, a longtime handyman himself, swapped trade tips with me, sharing stories of fixing fences and neighbors he'd known for decades. The kids from down the street circled around Jamie, inviting him to join games, their laughter peeling away layers of loneliness he'd carried. That day wasn't just a block party, it was a turning point. It laid the groundwork for new friendships that stitched Lisa more firmly into the community's fabric. It showed her that past mistakes and struggles didn't define her now. The people were willing to see beyond shadows. Yet despite these gains, old fears lurked beneath the surface. Some neighbors still exchanged wary looks. Whispered gossip flared low. And the scars of past judgments didn't vanish overnight. Lisa's courage in showing up was matched by the strength it took. To face those glances, to offer kindness despite past wounds. Over the following weeks, community life became a new frontier. I accompanied Lisa to neighborhood meetings, helped set up the flower shop's stall at the local farmers market, and joined in volunteer efforts to clean the nearby park. Each small action built layers of trust and connection, proof that belonging was something earned with patience and persistence. The transformations were subtle but profound. A neighbor brought over freshly baked bread as a thank you. Another asked Lisa's advice on flower arranging. A local cafe owner invited us for coffee after the shop's late opening day. These small acts chipped away at distance, turning acquaintances into friends, walls into bridges. Jamie thrived in this enriched environment. Kids who'd once ignored him now welcomed him to their games, and Max's friendly demeanor helped ease social hurdles. The community grew, not just around Lisa's house, but inside it, to its warmth seeping into every corner. But the journey was far from linear. Old insecurities and setbacks emerged, sometimes sparked by rumors or misunderstandings. At one neighborhood barbecue, a tense conversation about Lisa's past tested new bonds. A few neighbors voiced concerns about trust and stability, their words cutting sharper than any tool I'd ever wielded. Yet, Lisa responded with grace, honesty, and the quiet strength that had brought her this far. I stood beside her, reminding her that setbacks didn't erase progress and that true community is about growth, forgiveness, and showing up even when it hurts. We spent nights unraveling the doubt, leaning on each other to rebuild confidence and hope. Through it all, the mailbox stood outside, shining in the sun, weathering storms, unmoved by judgments or time. It was more than a fixture. It was a symbol of our journey. Each letter it received was a small triumph, proof that connection was possible and worth fighting for. As the months rolled on, Lisa became more than a neighbor. She became a pillar, organizing community gardening days, helping at local schools, and turning her flower shop into a hub of creativity and care. The neighborhood, once distant and guarded, welcomed her, and through that, we all grew stronger. I realized that community isn't just about proximity, it's about vulnerability, courage, and the shared stories that bind us. Lisa's journey was a testament to that truth. A story of trust rebuilt one small act at a time. This wasn't just about fixing a mailbox or a fence. It was about healing lives, knitting together a frayed fabric, and delivering hope in unexpected packages, the kind that come not in boxes but in smiles, kindnesses, and the steady pulse of belonging. And in that, we found something rare and beautiful, a place to call home. The hardest lessons come not from the moments when everything falls into place, but from the ones when every step forward feels like wading through quicksand. Lisa, Jamie, Max, and I had come so fair, a fractured family slowly reassembling, but the wounds of the past don't just fade. They linger in quiet fears, in whispered doubts, and in the memories that threaten to pull us back. Resilience isn't a flashy thing. It's quiet. It's getting up when you don't want to. It's choosing to remain when it's easier to leave. It's the daily renewing of trust, when every fiber of your being begs you to withdraw. For Lisa, this meant carrying the weight of motherhood, business, and healing, even when exhaustion pressed down like a tidal wave. For Jamie, it meant confronting fears bigger than his years and sticking his hand out to a world that hadn't always been kind. For Max, it meant finding a family worth guarding, even when shadows lurked. For me, it meant showing up over and over, not as a savior, but as a steady partner in their lives' unfolding drama. We all faced moments of doubt. Days when the mailboxes and fences we fixed inside were mirrors for the cracks growing too large to ignore outside. When bills piled up, voices rose in frustration, or past ghosts showed up uninvited, threatening to unravel the progress made. Anger flared, tears spilled, But then, in the face of all that, we chose to hold on to the hope, to one another, and to the belief that love, however messy, was worth it. I remember a particularly brutal winter when everything seemed to conspire against us. Flower shops struggled under the weight of holiday expenses and dwindling customers. Jamie battled a stubborn illness that left him weak and scared. Lisa, already stretched thin, lay awake night after night, worry knitting deep lines across her face. Max, normally so lively, seemed to sense the heaviness and stayed close, offering silent comfort. For me, the temptation to retreat whispered loudly, but I didn't listen, because this wasn't about me. It was about something bigger, about standing firm when storms rage. There's a kind of magic and resilience that's often overlooked. It's in the small refusals to give up, in the daily rituals that anchor us. Like the mornings when Lisa brewed coffee before dawn, setting the day's tone with quiet determination. Or the evenings when Jamie's laughter, though rare, rang through the house, a fragile song of hope. Or Max's deep, steady presence, a lifeline tethering us to the moment. Our family wasn't perfect. It was a patchwork quilt of flaws and fierce love stitched together with care. Trust was, perhaps, the most fragile thread in this complex tapestry. Lisa had known betrayal, abandonment, and disappointment, stories etched deep in the lines around her eyes. Opening her heart again was a risk, a cliff dive, into the unknown, where the landing wasn't guaranteed. Each day she took leaps of faith, trusting me with her fears, her dreams, and her son. And I, in turn, learned what it means to be trusted not as a flawless hero, but as a man willing to meet them where they are, scars, doubts, and all. Jamie's trust was a treasure fought for with patience and love. He watched closely, wary of promises broken by others, but he saw the constancy in my actions, the early morning rides to school, the extra help with homework, the quiet encouragement when the world felt overwhelming. Slowly he let down his walls, allowing laughter and friendship to seep in where fear once lived. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't simple. But every small crack of openness was a triumph. Redefining family became our quiet mission. Society's blueprint was a shadow against which we measured ourselves. But our story was different, a blend of chosen bonds, imperfect roles, and fiercely protective love. We weren't about perfection. We were about survival, healing, and holding on. Lisa's family past, Jamie's needs, Max's unconditional loyalty, my steady presence wove together a narrative that transcended bloodlines and expectations. That winter, despite the challenges, was also a season of revelation. We saw the power in leaning on one another. When Lisa faltered, Jamie became a surprising source of strength. When Jamie struggled, Lisa's fierce love wrapped him in safety. Max continued to be the silent heart, and I did everything I could to be the anchor that steadied us all. Together. We faced the darkness with a stubborn lightness, a refusal to let hardship define us. It was in this persistence that we found our truth. The truth that love isn't about flawless beginnings or fairy tale endings. It's about showing up when it's hard, loving when it's messy, and building day by day, family that stands, no matter what. The mailbox outside, though small and simple, took on greater meaning than ever before. It wasn't just wood and metal. It was the symbol of what had been delivered. Resilience, trust, and a love redefined by struggle and hope. Each letter slipped inside was a reminder that connection and healing continued, that no matter the odds, something good could take root and grow. When spring finally arrived, bringing new life to the dying season, it felt like a metaphor for us. Fresh blossoms appeared not only in Lisa's shop, but in our lives, moments of joy, breakthrough, and promise. We celebrated quietly, knowing that while hardships wouldn't vanish, we had built something stronger to face them. I thought back, often to the day I came to fix a mailbox, expecting a simple job and walking into a story far richer and more complex than any toolbox could solve. What I found was a reminder that nothing worth having comes easy. But with resilience, trust, love, even imperfect and rather impossible becomes possible. We were still writing the pages of our story, imperfect and beautiful. And I'd choose this journey, this mess, and this family. Every single day. 2 years had passed since I first knocked on Lisa's door with my toolbox, and the question had been burning in my chest for months. Not the kind of question you ask on impulse, the kind that grows from certainty, the deep-rooted knowledge that this woman, this boy, this life we'd built together was worth making permanent. I'd been carrying my grandmother's ring in my pocket for weeks, the small velvet box wearing smooth from nervous fingers. Every evening, I'd find a reason to touch it, to remind myself that some dreams were worth the leap. But asking Lisa to marry me wasn't just about us. It was about Jamie, about promises made to a boy who'd learned not to trust easily, about becoming not just a family in practice, but in name. The decision to propose hadn't come lightly. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubts that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with responsibility. Was I ready to be not just Lisa's partner, but Jamie's father figure in every legal sense? Could I handle the weight of promises that went beyond fixing broken things to fixing broken hearts, broken dreams, broken trust? The ring itself carried its own story. My grandmother had worn it for 47 years through the Great Depression. To wars, the loss of a child, and countless smaller storms that test the foundation of love. When my grandfather gave it to me before he died, he'd held my hands in his weathered ones and said, "This ring doesn't make love last, son. Love makes the ring matter." I'd carried those words with me, understanding them more deeply now than I ever had as a young man. Lisa and I had talked about marriage in the abstract, those careful conversations couples have when they're testing the waters without diving in. We discussed Jamie's need for stability, the legal protections marriage would provide, the symbolism of choosing each other officially. But talking about marriage and proposing are two different animals entirely. One is theoretical. The other is a leap into the terrifying, wonderful unknown. The moment came on an ordinary Tuesday. Jamie was at school. Max was sprawled across the kitchen floor like a furry area rug, and Lisa stood at the sink washing dishes, humming something soft and unrecognizable. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the gold in her hair, and suddenly the words tumbled out, not the speech I'd rehearsed in the mirror a dozen times, but something truer. "Lisa," I said, and she turned, soap bubbles still clinging to her hands like tiny promises. "I know we didn't start this the conventional way. Hell, nothing about us has been conventional. But I want to ask you something, and I need you to know. I'm asking all of you, Jamie, even Max here." Her eyes widened as I dropped to one knee, the ring box trembling in my hands like a bird trying to take flight. "Will you marry me? Will you let me love you officially, legally, permanently? Will you let Jamie call me Dad if he wants to? Will you let me spend the rest of my life fixing whatever breaks and celebrating whatever flourishes in this beautiful chaos we've built?" The silence stretched long enough for doubt to creep in, the kind of silence that makes you question everything. Wonder if you've misread the signs, if you've pushed too hard, too fast. But then Lisa's tears came, not the kind born of sadness, but the overwhelming kind that comes when something you've wanted but never dared hope for suddenly becomes real. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, stronger. "Yes, Mark. Yes to all of it." The ring slipped onto her finger like it had always belonged there. We held each other in that sun-drenched kitchen. Two people who'd found each other through broken mailboxes and mended hearts. While Max thumped his tail against the floor in approval, when Jamie came home from school that afternoon, we sat him down for what felt like the most important conversation of our lives. Kids are surprisingly perceptive about adult emotions. And Jamie took one look at Lisa's glowing face and my nervous energy and knew something big had shifted. "We have something to tell you," Lisa began, but Jamie interrupted with the matter-of-fact wisdom that 8-year-olds sometimes possess. "Mark asked you to marry him," he said. Not a question, but a statement delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been watching and waiting. "How did you know?" I asked, genuinely curious. Jamie shrugged, the gesture so much like his mother's. It made my heart squeeze. "You've been acting weird for weeks, like when I wanted to ask Sarah to be my girlfriend but couldn't figure out how. And Mom's been smiling different, like she knows a secret." His reaction, when we confirmed his suspicions, was pure joy wrapped in 8-year-old practicality. "Does this mean you'll live here forever?" he asked. And when I nodded, he threw his arms around my waist with a fierceness that nearly knocked me over. "Good," he said into my shirt. "Max likes you, and I like you, and Mom smiles more when you're here. Plus, you make better pancakes than she does." "Hey," Lisa protested, but she was laughing, and the sound filled every corner of the house with light. That evening, after Jamie was asleep and Max had claimed his spot on the couch, Lisa and I sat on the front porch, looking out at the mailbox that had started it all. It stood there in the streetlight's glow, solid and dependable, a monument to the unexpected ways love finds us. "Are you scared?" Lisa asked, her head on my shoulder, the ring catching moonlight like a tiny star. "Terrified," I admitted, "but not of marrying you. I'm scared of disappointing you, of not being enough, of promising more than I can deliver." She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of everything we'd been through together. "You've been showing up for 2 years, Mark, through every crisis, every doubt, every small victory. You've already delivered more than I ever dared hope for. Marriage won't make you perfect, but it will make us official. Honestly, after everything we've survived, I think we can handle a wedding." She was right, of course. We'd weathered storms that would have broken couples with decades between them. We'd learned to communicate through conflict, to trust despite past wounds, to build something beautiful from broken pieces. A wedding was just the celebration of what we'd already built, the legal recognition of a family that had been forming, long before any ring was offered or vows were spoken. But even so, as we sat there planning our future, I felt the weight of the promise I'd made. Not just to Lisa, but to Jamie, to Max, to the life we'd constructed from hope and stubbornness and love. It was a weight I carried gladly, understanding. Now what my grandfather had meant about love making the ring matter. The mailbox stood sentinel in the darkness, holding letters and bills and the ordinary correspondence of daily life. But to me it would always be the symbol of the extraordinary, the place where a simple repair job became the foundation of forever. We didn't want a big wedding, too much noise, too many eyes, too much pressure on something that felt sacred in its simplicity. Instead, we chose the neighborhood park where Jamie played catch with Max, where Lisa had slowly learned to trust the community that surrounded us, where I'd spent countless evenings walking and thinking about the family we were becoming. Guest list was small, but meaningful. Mrs. Caldwell and her husband from across the street, who'd become surrogate grandparents to Jamie. The young couple next door who'd watched our story unfold from their front yard. Mr. Ramirez, the retired handyman who'd shared trade secrets and life wisdom in equal measure. A handful of neighbors who'd witnessed our journey from strangers to family. These were the people who'd seen us at our worst and celebrated us at our best, who understood that love isn't always pretty, but it's always worth fighting for. Jamie stood as my best man, serious and proud in his first real suit, navy blue, with a tie that took 3 YouTube videos and 2 attempts to get right. He'd insisted on wearing his best sneakers, the ones with lights in the heels, because fancy doesn't mean uncomfortable. His hair was slicked back with enough gel to survive a hurricane, and he carried the rings with the solemnity of someone entrusted with the crown jewels. Max wore a bow tie that he tolerated, with the patience of a saint who understands that sometimes love requires sacrifice. Lisa had spent weeks training him to walk down the aisle without his usual enthusiastic bounds, and he'd mastered the art of dignified restraint for exactly the length of time it took to deliver the rings. Tied to his collar, Lisa's dress was simple white, cotton that moved like water when she walked, no veil. Just flowers from her own shop woven into her hair by Jamie's careful 8-year-old fingers. She looked like spring itself, like hope made visible, like every good thing I'd never known I was looking for. Her bouquet was a masterpiece of her own creation, white roses mixed with wildflowers, baby's breath, and herbs from the garden weed. Planted together behind the house, the ceremony itself was conducted by Mrs. Peterson, a retired judge who lived 2 blocks over and had offered her services after hearing about our engagement at the neighborhood coffee morning. She'd known us both as individuals before we became a unit, had watched our courtship unfold through small-town gossip and direct observation.
Oh.
And she understood the significance of what we were celebrating. Marriage, she began, her voice carrying. Across the small gathering is not the beginning of love, but the public declaration of a love that has already proven itself. Mark and Lisa, you've shown this community what it means to build a family not from biology but from choice, not from perfection but from persistence. The vows we'd written were simple, honest, free from flowery language that didn't match our practical hearts. I promised to show up, to keep fixing whatever broke, to love not just Lisa, but the boy who'd taught me what it meant to be trusted by someone small and precious. Lisa promised to keep her heart open despite past hurts, to share not just her love, but her son. To trust in the family we'd built from spare parts and stubborn hope. But it was Jamie's surprise addition that broke every heart in that small gathering. When Mrs. Peterson asked if anyone else had something to say, Jamie stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. I want to promise something too, he announced, his voice carrying farther than his small frame suggested it could. I promise to be the best son I can be to both of you. And Mark, I promise to help you take care of Mom, and I promise to teach Max new tricks so he doesn't get bored. And Mom, I promise to remember to put my dishes in the dishwasher without being asked at least half the time. The laughter that rippled through our small crowd was the kind that comes from joy too big to contain. Lisa was crying happy tears that caught the afternoon sunlight like diamonds. I was fighting my own battle with emotion, overwhelmed by the generosity of a child who'd chosen to include himself in vows he wasn't required to make. When Mrs. Peterson pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss was soft, sweet, full of promise and gratitude. But the real moment came when Jamie threw his arms around both of us, creating a three-person hug that Max immediately tried to join, nearly toppling us all into the grass. The reception was held right there in the park picnic tables covered, with checkered tablecloths, food contributed by neighbors who'd insisted on helping, music from a Bluetooth speaker that occasionally cut out when Mr. Henderson got too close with his pacemaker. It was perfectly imperfect, exactly what we'd wanted. Jamie gave a toast that he'd clearly practiced, but that came from his heart. Thank you for making us a real family. Thank you for making Mom happy. She sings more now, and she makes better coffee when she's happy. The simplicity of his observation about his mother's happiness, measured by the quality of her morning coffee, captured something essential about the way children see the world through the lens of small, daily improvements in the people they love. Mrs. Caldwell presented us with a wedding gift that made Lisa cry all over again. Photo album filled with pictures she'd been secretly taking over the past 2 years. Images of us working in the garden, Jamie teaching Max to fetch, family dinners visible through the kitchen window. Moments of ordinary life that had been anything but ordinary to the people living them, as the sun began to set, painting the sky. In shades of pink and gold, we found ourselves alone for a moment, while Jamie played with Max and the neighbors cleaned up around us. Lisa's head rested on my shoulder, her wedding ring catching the last light of day. "Do you think it's real?" she asked quietly. "Do you think this kind of happiness gets to last?" I thought about her question seriously, understanding the fear behind it. We'd both learned that life could snatch away good things without warning. That happiness was often temporary, that love sometimes wasn't enough to overcome circumstance. I think, I said slowly, that nothing lasts forever, but I think some things last long enough to matter. I think what we've built is strong enough to survive whatever comes next. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was steady with conviction. Then let's make sure it matters. Let's make sure every day counts. The mailbox stood in the distance, visible from where we sat, still faithfully holding the mail that connected us to the wider world. But today, it felt like more than a repository for bills and letters. It felt like a witness to promises made and kept, to a love that had grown from the simple act of showing up when someone needed help, as we gathered our small family and headed. Max trotting ahead with his bow tie now askew, Jamie carrying leftover cake and talking a mile a minute about the day. Lisa's hand warm in mine, I understood that the wedding hadn't changed us fundamentally. We'd been a family for months. bound by choice and commitment and daily acts of love. But there was something powerful about having said the words out loud, about having made promises in front of people who mattered, about wearing rings that told the world we belonged to each other. It was the difference between living together and choosing each other, between circumstances that brought us together and a decision that would keep us together. That night, after Jamie was finally asleep, having been allowed to stay up past his bedtime for the special occasion, Lisa and I sat on our front porch now, legally and officially, and watched the mailbox stand guard in the streetlight's glow. "What do you think would have happened if your truck had broken down on a different street?" Lisa asked. I considered the question, the strange chain of circumstances that had led me to her door on that first day. Broken truck, a kind neighbor's recommendation, a mailbox that needed fixing, a family that needed healing. I don't know, I admitted, but I'm grateful it didn't. I'm grateful for every random chance that brought us together, even the broken mailbox, especially the broken mailbox. We sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned that love isn't always the fairy tale we're told to expect. Sometimes it's messier, more complicated, built from daily choices rather than grand gestures. But it's also deeper, more resilient, capable of weathering storms that would destroy something built on passion alone. The wedding was over. But the marriage, the real work of being a family, was just beginning. And as I looked at the woman beside me, at the house that held our sleeping son and faithful dog, the mailbox that had started it all, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. After all, we'd already proven we could take broken things and make them beautiful. Now, we had a lifetime to practice. 3 months into our marriage, life decided to test the strength of what we'd built. Started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning, the kind that makes your blood run cold before you even hear the words. Lisa's voice was shaking when she found me in the garage where I was organizing tools and pretending that routine could keep anxiety at bay. "Mark," she said, and I could hear the fear threading through her voice like a wire about to snap. "That was Dr. Martinez, Jamie's tests. They want to do more tests." Words hit like a physical blow. Jamie had been complaining of headaches for weeks, fatigue that seemed to go beyond normal 8-year-old tiredness. We'd attributed it to growth spurts, to the adjustment of a new school year, to the 1,000 small explanations parents use to push away the fears that lurk in the back of every mother's mind. But the tests told a different story. Abnormal blood work, swollen lymph nodes, words like concerning and further investigation, and we need to rule out that hung in the air like smoke. It's choking out everything else. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of medical appointments, waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and fear, and conversations with specialists who spoke in careful, measured tones about possibilities and probabilities. Jamie, bless his heart, took it all with the resilience of childhood, more concerned about missing soccer practice than about the needles and machines and serious faces that surrounded him. Lisa was a different story. I watched her transform from the woman who'd learned to hope again into someone hollowed out by terror, moving through days on autopilot while her mind raced through every worst-case scenario. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, stopped seeing anything beyond the darkness that threatened to swallow our barely formed family whole. "What if we lose him?" she whispered one night, her voice breaking in the darkness of our bedroom. "What if I finally found happiness and it gets taken away? What if this is punishment for stop?" I said, pulling her closer, feeling her body shake with the force of trying to hold back tears. "This isn't punishment. This isn't about what you deserve or don't deserve. This is just life being life, and unfair and sometimes cruel. But whatever this is, we face it together." But even as I said the words, I felt my own fear creeping in. Not just fear for Jamie, though that was overwhelming enough, but fear for what this might do to Lisa. To us, to the family we'd worked so hard to build. I'd seen how loss could destroy people, how it could turn love into something sharp and dangerous, how it could make someone decide that caring too much was a luxury they couldn't afford. The waiting was the worst part. Days stretched like years, between appointments, between test results, between the phone calls that might deliver news we weren't ready to hear. I found myself working longer hours, taking on projects that didn't need immediate attention. Anything to keep my hands busy while my mind spiraled through possibilities I couldn't control. Max seemed to sense the change in our household's energy. He stuck closer to Jamie, following him from room to room with a vigilance that was both touching and heartbreaking. Dogs, I'd learned, have an intuition about illness that humans often lack. Max's behavior confirmed what we all feared but couldn't say out loud. Jamie, for his part, handled the medical chaos with a maturity that broke my heart. He submitted to blood draws and scans with only minimal complaining, asked questions that showed he understood more than we'd given him credit for, and seemed more concerned about his parents' worry than his own discomfort. "You and Mom going to get divorced because I'm sick?" he asked one evening, while we waited for Lisa to finish talking to yet another doctor on the phone. The question came out of nowhere, delivered with the matter-of-fact tone he used for asking about homework, or what was for dinner. "What? No, buddy. Why would you think that?" He shrugged, but I could see the real worry behind his casual gesture. "Tommy at school said his parents got divorced after his sister got really sick. Said sometimes parents can't handle it, and they break up." I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that were too old for his face, too wise for someone who should still believe in the security of adults having all the answers. "Jamie, listen to me. Your mom and I are married because we choose to be together through everything, good times and bad times, scary times and happy times. Being sick doesn't make you a burden. It makes you someone who needs extra love and care, and we've got plenty of both." He nodded solemnly, but I could see he wasn't entirely convinced. The fear of abandonment ran deep in him, a scar from his early years that might never fully heal. This medical crisis was poking at that old wound, making it fresh and raw again. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was both relief and terror rolled into one overwhelming moment. Not cancer, the word we'd all been afraid to say out loud, but a rare autoimmune condition that would require ongoing treatment. Lifestyle changes and constant monitoring. Serious but manageable. Treatable but not curable. Lisa collapsed. In the parking lot outside the medical center, great sobbing breaths that shook her entire body. Not tears of sadness, but the kind of crying that comes when you've been holding your breath for weeks and finally remember how to breathe again. "He's going to be okay," she kept repeating, like a mantra she needed to convince herself was true. "He's going to be okay." But even as we celebrated the relative good news, I could see the toll this had taken on all of us. Lisa had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of weeks of broken sleep. Jamie had developed a nervous habit of touching his neck, feeling for the lymph nodes that had caused all this trouble. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, my appetite disappearing somewhere between the first scary test result and the final diagnosis. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Jamie would need medication, regular checkups, careful attention to his diet and exercise. There would be good days and bad days, remissions and flare-ups, the constant background hum of managing a chronic condition. But he would be okay. We would be okay. That night, after Jamie was finally asleep, exhausted by the day's emotional roller coaster, Lisa and I sat on our front porch, looking out at the mailbox that had become our family's unofficial mascot. It stood there in the streetlight's glow, unchanged by the crisis that had nearly broken us. A reminder that some things endure even when everything else feels fragile. "I was so scared," Lisa said quietly. "Not just of losing him, but of losing everything. Of going back to being alone." "You're not alone," I said, taking her hand, feeling the wedding ring that was still new enough to surprise me sometimes. "We're never going to be alone again. Promise? Promise." It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of everything we'd learned about commitment. Love wasn't just the easy moments, the laughter and joy and shared dreams. It was also this: sitting in the darkness, holding each other up when the world felt like it was falling apart, choosing each other even when fear tried to drive you apart. The mailbox stood witness to our whispered promises. Just as it had witnessed our first conversations, our courtship, our wedding. Would it be there tomorrow, too, ready to receive whatever news the world might deliver, good or bad, expected or surprising, and we would be there to face it together. A family tested by fire and proven stronger than we'd ever imagined possible. Jamie's illness had been a reminder of how fragile life could be, but it had also shown us something precious, that love isn't just about sharing happiness. It's about sharing fear, sharing strength, sharing the determination to keep going, even when the path ahead looks uncertain. We'd passed the test, all of us. And while there would surely be others, I felt confident now, in a way I hadn't before. We weren't just a family by choice anymore. We were a family by choice, tested by adversity, proven capable of surviving whatever came next. The mailbox gleamed in the moonlight, holding tomorrow's possibilities while we held each other, and planned for a future that suddenly felt more precious because we'd almost lost it. A year passed, and with it came this strange mixture of relief and vigilance that defines life with a chronic illness. Jamie's condition stabilized under treatment, but the fear never completely disappeared. It lived in the background now, a quiet hum of awareness that colored every decision, every plan, every moment of simple joy. We learned to live with uncertainty, to find happiness in the spaces between worry, to celebrate the ordinary days when nothing went wrong. Jamie was now 9, old enough to understand his condition and mature enough to be part of managing it. He carried his medication with the same casual competence that other kids carried lunchboxes, and he could recite his symptoms and treatment plan with the precision of a medical student. But he was still a kid, still obsessed with soccer and video games, still capable of forgetting to brush his teeth despite daily reminders, still young enough to believe that his parents could fix almost anything. The real growing pains came not from his illness, but from the normal challenges of family life. Jamie was testing boundaries in ways he never had before, pushing against rules with the confidence of someone who'd survived something scary and wasn't about to be intimidated by bedtime enforcement. Lisa and I found ourselves navigating the delicate balance between the extra protectiveness that his condition warranted and the normal discipline that any 9-year-old needed. "You're not my real dad," he said one evening during a particularly heated argument about homework. The words hung in the air like a slap, sharp and unexpected and designed to hurt in the way that only children's truth-telling can. I felt the air leave my lungs, the old insecurity rushing back with a force that surprised me, because he was right. In the most technical sense, I wasn't his biological father. I hadn't been there for his first steps or first words. I was the man who'd shown up later, who'd chosen to love him and been chosen in return.
Ow.
But there was no blood between us, no shared DNA, no legal adoption papers that would survive if Lisa and I ever split up. Lisa's face went white, then red. With anger, "Jamie, that was cruel and unnecessary. Apologize to Mark right now." But I held up a hand, stopping her before she could launch into the lecture I could see building. This was between Jamie and me, and it needed to be handled carefully. The boy was hurting not physically, but emotionally, testing the bonds that held our family together to see if they would snap under pressure. "You're right," I said, sitting down so we were at eye level. "I'm not your biological father. I didn't make you, and I wasn't there when you were born. But I chose to be your dad, and you chose to let me. That's different from biology, but it's not less important." Jamie's anger deflated slightly, replaced by something that looked like confusion. "But what if you change your mind?" And there it was, the real fear underneath the lashing out. Not anger at homework or rules or authority, but the deep-seated terror of abandonment that had shaped his earliest years. His illness had stirred up all those old wounds, reminding him how quickly things could change, how the people you counted on could disappear without warning. "I can't prove to you that I'll never leave," I said honestly. "But I can tell you that for 3 years I've shown up every single day. I've been here for the boring stuff and the scary stuff and everything. In between, I've changed my whole life to be part of yours. That's what love looks like. Not feelings that come and go, but choices that stay consistent." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was small. "I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean it. I know you didn't. But it's okay to test me sometimes, to make sure I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere, buddy. You're stuck with me." Lisa's eyes were bright with tears. She was trying not to shed. Later, after Jamie was in bed, she told me how much those words had meant to her, how seeing me handle his anger with patience, instead of defensiveness, had shown her something new about the man she'd married. But parenting Jamie wasn't our only challenge. Lisa's flower shop was struggling, caught between rising costs and a customer base that was slowly shifting to online ordering and big box stores. She'd started the business as a refuge, a creative outlet that allowed her to work flexible, hours around Jamie's needs. But what had begun as a passion project was becoming a source of stress that kept her awake at night, calculating and recalculating numbers that never seemed to add up right. "Maybe I should just close it," she said one evening, surrounded by invoices and tax forms that painted a grim picture of the shop's finances. "Find a regular job with a steady paycheck and benefits." "Is that what you want?" I asked, though I could see the defeat in her shoulders. The way she'd stopped talking about new arrangements or seasonal displays with the enthusiasm that had once lit up her face. "I want to not worry about money every month. I want to know that if Jamie needs something, we can afford it. I want to stop feeling like I'm failing at everything." The shop had been more than a business to Lisa. It had been proof that she could build something beautiful from nothing, that her struggles hadn't destroyed her ability to create and nurture and grow. Watching her consider giving it up was like watching her consider giving up a piece of herself. But I also understood the practical reality. We needed steady income, reliable insurance, the security that came with traditional employment. My handyman business was doing well, but it wasn't enough to support a family comfortably, especially with Jamie's medical expenses adding a constant drain on our resources. "What if we tried something different?" I suggested. "What if instead of closing, we pivoted? Online sales, wedding consultations, maybe partnering with other local businesses?" She looked up from her paperwork, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the old Lisa, the one who believed that broken things could be fixed, that beautiful things could grow from difficult soil. "You think it could work?" "I think you're too good at what you do to give up without a fight. I think we're better at solving problems together than apart." It wasn't a magic solution, but it was hope, and hope, we'd learned, was often enough. To begin with, the other challenge we faced was more subtle, but equally important. Learning to be a family without losing ourselves as individuals. Lisa and I had fallen into the pattern of many couples, especially those dealing with a child's health issues, focusing so completely on family needs that we'd forgotten to nurture our relationship as husband and wife. We hadn't been on a date in months. We barely talked about anything other than Jamie's schedule, his medication, his schoolwork, his appointments. We were excellent co-parents and roommates, but we were struggling to remember how to be lovers, friends, partners in something bigger than just the daily logistics of family life. It was Mrs. Caldwell who finally intervened, offering to babysit Jamie for an entire Saturday so Lisa and I could rediscover each other. "You two need to remember why you fell in love," she said, with the kind of directness that only comes from decades of watching couples navigate the challenges of marriage. And so, Caldwell's watchful care, Lisa and I stepped out into a world that, for the first time in a long time, felt like it belonged to just the two of us. We didn't plan anything extravagant, just a walk through the farmer's market, coffee from the place where we'd had our second date, and a lazy afternoon in the park where Jamie had once taken his first unsteady steps toward us. It was unremarkable by social media standards, but it was everything we hadn't realized we needed. Uninterrupted conversation, shared laughter, the feel of her hand in mine without the weight of 1,000 responsibilities clinging to it. We talked to really talk not about Jamie's prescriptions or the flower shop's margins, but about who we were before and who we still wanted to become. I told her how I missed hearing her talk about the meanings of different blooms, how she used to light up explaining why lilies symbolized renewal, or how blue thistle meant strength and endurance. She confessed she missed the way I used to surprise her with little sketches on scrap paper, doodles of the life we were trying to build. That night, back home, with Jamie asleep and the world finally quiet, she curled into my side and whispered, "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I didn't give her a grand speech. I didn't promise that everything would be perfect. But I kissed her hair and said the only thing I knew to be absolutely true. We already are. Because okay wasn't about being free from struggle. It wasn't about Jamie never getting sick again or the flower shop suddenly turning a huge profit. It was about showing up for each other, choosing each other over and over, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to shut down or walk away. Love wasn't always the loud declarations or the big moments. Sometimes it was just standing in the kitchen together, washing dishes, planning tomorrow's meals, folding laundry, trying again. In the months that followed, we found new rhythms. Lisa slowly shifted the shop's focus toward event florals, with a modest but growing stream of online orders. I started offering small business maintenance packages, plumbing, carpentry, electrical anything a storefront might need. Jamie continued to thrive on because his condition disappeared, but because he knew he was surrounded by people who loved him fiercely, people who wouldn't run when things got hard. One evening, as the three of us sat on the back porch watching the sun dip below the trees, Jamie rested his head against my shoulder and said, "You're my real dad, you know? The realest one there is." I didn't say anything at first, just sat there, letting the words settle over me like the last warmth of daylight. Lisa reached over, her fingers intertwining with mine, and for a moment all the chaos of life, the worry, the bills, the late nights and early mornings faded into something simpler. Peace. We hadn't reached some storybook ending. The road ahead would still hold bumps and setbacks, heartbreak and hope. But we'd learned how to navigate it together. It's always together end that made all the difference. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't the ones with dramatic endings or perfect resolutions. They're the ones where people keep showing up for each other, where love is proven not in words, but in the quiet, steady choice to stay. And this was our story. It's not perfect, but real. And still unfolding. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.